we get to a point in our career where we need more. We look for paralegal education and still feel like it's not enough. So, what can we do? Why is paralegal education even a thing if we cannot even learn more of the core skills needed to succeed? Well, Kelli and I give you the inside scoop. Listen in for more.
Hey guys, it's your girl Etta. Welcome to the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast. And today I have the lovely Kelli with me. She specializes in legal education, but she does a lot more than that. And so that's what we're going to talk about. It's something really passionate for me. Obviously, I base my whole business on it. So definitely really important in my world. But today we're going to talk about her perspective, what she views legal education, maybe the future of it. We'll see where we get with the conversation, but really focus on the importance, the ins and outs of it, and her take on it. But before we do that, Kelli, would you mind introducing yourself to the audience? Welcome.
Thanks, Etta. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk with you today. So my name is Kelli Radnothy. I am a litigation paralegal. I've been practicing paralegal for about 20 years now, and I also have been able to move into a role serving sort of the humanitarian Good and Samaritan inside of me, working with a nonprofit organization here in Northern Nevada. That serves survivors of sexual assault, sex trafficking, and domestic violence. And then I also am serving as an instructor and a course developer for the University of Washington's Paralegal Program. So kind of have my toes in a couple different ponds, so I guess that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what we're going to talk about. I feel like, the whole brand is Limitless Paralegal, right? We have our whole event in October based around that concept, but legal education plays an important role on this. And like we were talking very briefly before the recording, a lot of people sometimes don't see the value of legal education anymore, especially when it comes to like legal professional support staffs, and not law, right? Because we don't need the law degree, obviously. We may or may not, depending on your jurisdiction, need a certification. So really highlighting the importance and what the legal education studies programs and all these curriculums and certification programs that are now launching as well, the importance of it and the future of it, right? Because we really want to highlight that there's still a need for it, right? It's not just going to disappear one day. There, like anything else in life, we need a foundation. We need the first pillar in order to build upward. So talk a little bit more about that and how that works, especially in your part of the land over there.
Well, so yeah, I think, you're hitting on some of those key words in there, fundamentals and foundations and, the pillars sort of how you operate within a certain industry, right? And yes, a little bit of the operations can be learned through, textbook reading or curriculum, but a good part of that is learned on the job. However, there's these essential skills, right? These skill sets that some of us have and some of us don't, or can curate, that are these durable skills, that sort of translate into whatever that industry may be, whether you're, let's say, a new paralegal or new legal assistant coming in. What are those, foundational skills that you would want to have excel at those skills so that your learning curve can be spent on other items when you're in the role that you're desiring, right? But then you also look at it as continued education for those of us that are paralegals and have been for a long time. We are continually learning. And if we stop having, like, letting our curiosity drive us or have inquisition be part of our day, no matter what we're doing or what client we're serving, we're kind of losing the whole purpose. I mean, I need to learn something new in order to serve someone else with that tool. So, and I think on the education side, you look at it as from an educator's perspective, through the pandemic, it's like, oh, boom, now you're also a Zoom teacher, like learn all the technical, background of this and this and this, no matter what your litigation technology skills may be, videography and, audio and visual, like all of these things, that's a whole new world of language to learn even, so being able to have that willingness to learn is like the plug into education, both the foundational education and continued education. So I think, where we're going in this legal world is just going to require more education, both for how the law is evolving and regulations are evolving to allow for different service providers to create access to to resources, but also, technology and software and applications that are going to support efficiency, right? And still effective client person service.
No,
So yeah, it's education is a big realm right now, and legal education, if the legal industry doesn't stay up with educating both those that are within it and the future of the legal professionals, it's a lost game.
No, I get it. And I completely agree with you as far as sometimes we miss the mark that we're learning every day, right? I mean, if we're not learning, we're dying, is what my dad would always say. And so understanding the importance of whatever it is, sometimes I always tell the paralegals I mentor or I coach is really, it's kind of like networking. Everybody sticks to networking within the legal industry, but I find it sometimes really nice and beneficial when we network outside the legal industry, because we get to learn their world, what they're looking at, how they perceive us. And so the more curiosity you add into the equation, the more awareness you add to the, overall learning experience, I feel like sometimes people think that our education system is stuck in the traditional way, but it can't be, right? The education cannot be stuck in the traditional way because it has to evolve with the generations. It has to evolve with the current societal norms. It has to evolve with the current legal trends and the legal information and the statutes and the policies. With limited licensing coming to play, that's a whole different ballgame. So understanding that education has no limitations, right? We're constantly learning, and whether it's in a professional setting or a non-traditional or however you want to label it, it still has its place, it still has its importance, and it still has its relevance, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's the beauty of it. It's not just applicable to when you're entering the legal industry, this continued education requirement for many of us, depending on where you are, where you are in the country or what your jurisdiction is, and as, like you were saying, as the legal landscape continues to evolve, right? We're considering more and more learners filling in, we need to have more subject matters that are relevant and timely and, appropriate for those audiences that need to retain that information, and so what skills though do we want to tap into? We're no longer looking at of memorizing a textbook. We're looking at, critical thinking and leadership skills and, detail orientation to, whether it's with data or verbal communication, however you're looking at it, these skills that we're having to grow right now are a personal skill set, and that's going to apply throughout the course of your career and lifetime, really,
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I think mentorship programs, apprenticeship, these are really going to become more maybe even required at that point, because I feel like it is necessary to find an internship or something, right, of some sort, some outside guidance when it comes to that, because most of the people that go into legal education programs, such as the paralegal studies programs that you create content and curriculum for, they're either new to the game, and they're trying to just seek and test the waters and really try to find some type of guidance, or they're seasoned at a very pivotal moment in their career and are trying to see if maybe having this degree will elevate their current either financial status or career status or both, really, depending on what their goals are when it comes to that. Which kind of brings me to my next question is, when you are creating your curriculum and your content and events or whatever it is that your role involves with the Washington University, really, do you do like focus groups? Like, how do you make sure that you're hitting the mark on this, right? Because it's a very innovative program. I actually looked into it, and you guys are doing a very good job. So really walk me through that process without obviously giving away any of the goodies.
Yeah, well, I think it starts from a pedagogy approach, of teaching in general, and then this sort of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, lens that we're now having to, look through for all curriculum development, not just the actual curriculum and content itself, but the design of the learning environment, because you might have students that are, down the road from you or across the world on another continent. Access, geographical boundaries really aren't, they're creating this whole new learning environment for us, because it's non-existent anymore. And so with that, though, there's a curation of skill just within that, critical thinking and learning how to work as a team, which is applicable in so many ways. So when I look at the sort of classroom, like our class time, that's more like the lab, right? Like it's the laboratory. And what are these skills that me coming from working in the laboratory for the past 20 years, right? What are the things I know we have to hit on? And then how can I supplement my knowledge, like my experience, with other individuals within the industry or other facets, connected to the industry that then support the bigger picture here that's going to be networking, right? Opportunity creation for whether it's a seasoned paralegal, wanting to advance a specific skill set, or somebody new and considering whether this is a career path they may want to go down, and how many opportunities there really are once you can specialize and curate this certain skill set that's like aligned with who you are, and what you want to do. Which takes a long time working in an industry to figure out what that looks like. 15 years ago, I never would have thought I'm teaching a paralegal program for a university and have the opportunity to coach and mentor new paralegals. You probably feel the same way, right? Like,
absolutely. It was funny because when I opened up my business, I didn't open it with the mindset of coaching, mentoring, teaching. Like that wasn't really, I knew there was a need for it. And I knew that there was a lack, right, of it, especially when I was in paralegal studies programs back in 2010. It was unheard of. Mentorship, apprenticeship. It was very hard to find within the actual programs. I had to go outside, my network and really reach out to people in order to receive that type of assistance. So when I opened up my business, the first 2 years, I was just, not just, but I was offering paralegal services. And for 2 years, that was what I was doing, on a contractual basis. Did not want to go back to the W-2 status. And that's what I did, for almost 3 years, 2.5 years or so. And then I started getting approached, by other paralegals interested in why I wasn't in the office full time and how I was getting paid. And, just within the same law firms that I was, subleasing my services. Basically, that's what I was doing. And they were just like, how did you do it? What, where do I start? And I saw that I tapped into something that a lot of people were just very interested in, or didn't see that it was an option, or maybe my mindset was just somewhere else, right? Because I always tell my paralegals is do not ever compare your 1 with my 5. I'm 5 steps ahead of you. Don't think that I'm better than you because of that. I've been through some stuff. I've already made the mistakes. I've already learned from those mistakes, and I've encapsulated them so that I can go ahead and help, the future of the legal industry, which is why I literally strategically my slogan is changing the legal industry from the inside out, right? Because our legal professionals, they need to change that mindset. They need to understand that just because you're a legal support staff, right? I think the word support kind of like triggers them, it's like a little trigger for them, and makes them feel like they're either less than, or that they're not up to the par with the lawyers, when in fact, you're a partner. You're there to help the lawyer succeed and execute that strategy if you're in the traditional setting. And now with, like I was saying, adhering to was the limited licensing, and this has been a game changer for the paralegal role. It's like, I knew it existed because I know in countries like India, Canada, they've had it, I think in India, it's called the barefoot paralegal. And so in Canada, they have California has a version of it as well for a while. I think it was called legal document specialist or something around those lines. But these concepts have always been around, right? And there's many concepts out there. And so it was funny to see the reactions when they were actually getting passed and when it was actually coming to fruition, I guess,
Right.
here in the States. I started laughing because I was like, I knew about this a long time ago. I knew it was a possibility. And that's actually what inspired me to open up my business, because I knew eventually, the Americas were going to hop on board and we were going to be the frontier for that, the pioneers or whatever you want to call it. And so I had already set up my business unconsciously in this weird way that, okay, well, that's really where I see myself, 5 years from now or 10 years or whatever the case may be. So understanding that it is a limitless career, and that you can literally chameleon it, right, any way you like, but that you still need the foundation, right? Back to our, original point, right, was that you still need the foundation. You still need a starting point in order to get to the finish line. And I feel like legal education does when done well, does a really great job of providing the networking aspect of it, the mentorship, the skills and the soft skills and hard skills and all the mandatory skills that come along with being a paralegal. And I feel now, especially after COVID, the legal education in and of its own really flourished, right? Everybody's revamping their paralegal studies programs because they're realizing that it wasn't enough. It just wasn't. So tap into that. Like what changes did you see from like COVID to now, basically? Because I'm sure you saw a lot.
Yeah, well, I think first, it's multifaceted because we're looking at for access, right? Like our geographical barriers have been broken, like that's far beyond. And specifically like with the University of Washington, which I'm sure University of Florida, these large institutions that have a very deep international reach. They for a long time have had programs that extended over these geographical barriers, but then you have COVID happen, and now everyone, all your instructors, all of your professors, everybody is working in a remote environment. And what that creates for the people that are teaching, for administration, it's a whole new realm of learning for them as well, right? Like everybody's like, oh my gosh, I'm learning how to do this, And so we start to look at it through the perspective of like humans. We're all humans. Like nobody is exempt from suffering or pain or frustration. We all experience this, and we experienced it, unfortunately, together for the most part for what, 2 years, 2.5, 3 years. And so if, we look at, there was this great resignation or the reshuffling or, so what do we look at as like, what do you want as quality candidates out there in the workforce, but also what is a lucrative working environment now for the workforce, right? And so you have to have the skill sets from both camps there to match, right? And so I look at, the change in the learning environment is more aimed at where do professionals want to go with their career? What are they seeking? What kind of information are they seeking to be applicable and practical for the choices they're making in their life, not just professionally, personal matters is weighing more on these scales these days. People are choosing family over work because they saw how valuable that time can be now with some of these people. Even though we were stuck for 2 years with those same people under the same roof without the ability to, have breaks, but still, and we survived. Like, oh my gosh, like the resilience and adaptability we all displayed through this is quite remarkable, So when we look at it that way, like it's a learning environment encapsulated just in this human experience,
And I love that you formatted it that way with the human experience, because I feel like we lose the human in humanity sometimes. And that goes for our profession, for our education, for our societal norms. It really goes into really you as a person and you as a human at the end of the day, which really can affect the way we learn, the way we receive information. And like you were saying, accessibility has always been an issue that really was probably highlighted a lot more, right? With the lower income communities not having Wi-Fi, just as simple as that, right? If you don't have Wi-Fi, you can't Zoom, right? If you don't have a laptop or a computer, or the tools is what I'm trying to say. And I feel like that kind of goes with the accessibility and the education. Sometimes we don't have the tools or the access to several things. It's not just financially. And so we had to like really navigate through all those different levels. And I think we're still trying to navigate, right? Especially now with technology, like really evolving. ChatGPT changed the game, for everyone and for teachers, right? It's just been really, really, really evolved in more ways than a lot of people would have ever imagined, which I think translated also in the legal industry, right? Because I remember I used to go to courtrooms and they didn't even have the outlet I needed. Like, I had to go get a converter for the outlet, and now it's like you can do a whole trial through Zoom. Like, what? Mind blown, right? So understanding that sometimes with the negative comes a lot of positives and a lot of innovation, and people just had to get creative, right? We just had to get creative to get the job done. We can no longer procrastinate. We can no longer prolong things. We can no longer make excuses and build obstacles to get to the end game. And I feel like education was a great way for that. People started seeking that knowledge. And I think it did really well when the universities were like, oh no, we need to upgrade, just like everything else. And it was a real big eye-opener, I believe anyway, because I was in the midst of it. And I didn't, unfortunately, I wasn't blessed enough to know about it before COVID, but I definitely was in the trenches when it was in like the transformation mode, right? So I saw the big drastic changes in cost was one of them, right? Because lower overhead is more affordability, right? Because they didn't have to have the big facilities and all that stuff. And a lot of buildings either closed down or started subleasing, and really, really found ways to provide what you were talking about, that accessibility, the formatting, these bigger companies started donating, right? Laptops and material and books and things like that. And it was a very good community, right? Like we just created a community, and it wasn't just local, like people everywhere were chiming in, and they're like, no, you guys have something good, we want to invest our time, our effort, our money, whatever they could have, our volunteer hours, whatever they were able to do. So it really did change the game. I think COVID was more of a blessing for the legal industry than anything else, because it made the necessary changes that we needed to do a long time ago. We were just in denial, maybe. I don't know what it was. I have no idea. But for sure, COVID woke us all up in many ways, like you were saying, with personal and professional. But I think it did it fast forwarded a whole bunch of years
Right.
for that, right? So my last question, because we're getting to the 30-minute round, but my last question for you is, what do you see the limited licensing? How do you see that evolving, translating, chameleon, whatever it is? How do you foresee this? And I'm not talking about 10 years from now. I'm talking about like within the next couple of years. Where do you see that going? And how do you think paralegals would benefit? Like, what are the pros and cons of it, right? In your opinion, of course.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's so exciting because it's so near and dear to my heart because, being a paralegal for so long, and having worked in California for so long, so being compliant with their rules for regulating paralegals, to know that this like realm that we've known for so long is needed is actually coming to fruition in many states, and that there's many state bars and Supreme Courts that are doing the diligent research to figure out how to effectively and correctly roll out these programs. Because as we see, if you do it incorrectly, like how it happened in Washington state, the funding wasn't, all the wheels weren't lined up the right way. And so the wagon fell off the tracks at some point, and that's one of the hard things when it comes to legislature and lawmaking and regulation of professions, right? But I see it more along the lines of, that paraprofessional level, which is something like registered nurses, and different kinds of, in the medical profession, each state has different requirements for nurse practitioners, as opposed to medical assistants, as opposed to registered nurses, as opposed to surge techs. There's these different journey levels, or what, for lack of better terms, that you could be applying. And I think that when we see what the need is from our communities, where that access to legal services is essential to, navigating certain processes that the majority of our low or middle class households are going to experience at some point, it needs to be something that's affordable and accessible. And so I think, the more and more it's talked about, the more and more there's controversy about, why somebody believes it should happen and why somebody believes it shouldn't. It's all valid points, but the reality of it is, what are the needs within our communities right now? And these kinds of programs are targeting making an impact and a change for those communities and those community members, which that to me is like super exciting from the legal industry's perspective, because everybody that works in the legal industry, aside from the bad apples, right? But everybody in the legal industry wants to help others. That's the whole point of being there. So to be able to know that there's bridges that are happening to allow to access more people to help, is like, we're walking into heaven's gates this way, right here in front of us in our, real mortal lives. And, so it's so exciting. Although, regulation and the legislature to support that regulation effectively, is that framework is going to take a long time to get right. And each state is going to be charged with doing it on their own. And so we're going to have states that, drag their heels for years and years, or change their minds about something that they thought was good all along. That's the nature of politics and legislature. But I think, the future is bright, more because we're seeing ways that this access is being bridged, and that whatever the term is for those people building that bridge, they're angels, and so I think it's more, limited licensing, and I think limited scope representation. It's clear it's a need in every single state within every single community. So our education programs are going to have to step up their game, right? But we also have law schools that already have classes that would be applicable to this, other level of professionals. So instead of bringing on more, high expense things, why don't we complement what the curriculum is that's already there, and merge these sorts of demographics so that we're properly serving those communities. There doesn't need to be this caste system anymore of, oh, the assistant or it's my paralegal, let me get my secretary, like that sort of thing. We're all equals, we're all members of the team, and what we contribute to the team is actually serving the client best. And so those, everybody has a seat at the table of the future that I see when it comes to legal services. And that's like beyond exciting.
I love that you talked about access, which I think has been the main concept throughout our conversation today. It's all about access, right? We have to look at the bigger picture, which is sometimes I feel like here in the States, we miss the mark on that. We're so like you said, politics and legislating, they're so focused on their agenda that they don't see like the greater good, right? They don't see the full picture. They're focused on their piece of the pie. And unfortunately, in this topic, it's going to be really hard to do that. We're going to have to start serving our community because that's who we are. We are servants of communities. We are here to serve the people, by the people, for the people. And they're not going to get away with that in this particular thing because it is literally the legal industry. We literally are the carriers of law. So unfortunately, I think it's, a lot of people say there's a lot of red tape, but there's only going to be red tape to an extent because of the need, right? And I feel like sometimes when they're pushed to the back of the wall, they're gonna have to eventually snap out of it and really negotiate this new venture. And everybody's gonna be afraid of new things. We all do, but if we didn't fight for our rights, women wouldn't be able to vote. There will still be slavery. So our country has known to pivot before on quite a few things. So I think we'll be fine.
The reminder that like women's voting rights were voted in when women weren't voting. So like that in itself is like the sign that like, we are heading in the right direction.
We're fine. We're making progress, which is what counts. And on that note, I want to thank you, Kelli, for being on the Let's Talk Paralegal podcast. Thank you for dedicating this time to me because I know how valuable it is to others and how valuable this conversation is going to be to everyone that listens from here on out. So I appreciate you. Happy Good Friday if you celebrated Passover, if you celebrate Passover. But thank you so much. And until justice is served, everyone, I'll be here. Bye.
Bye.